Hey, I'm Andrea Runnels, also known as the Social Studies Whisperer. And yes, I am passionate about American history, and I'm a huge history nerd. I also was a teacher for 16 years. I left the public school classroom because I want to help support English language learners from the outside. And by helping teachers, I can help support those kids. I also left the classroom to be a champion for kids with ADHD. So a lot of the activities that I include in my social studies topics are things that are modified to meet the needs of my two special populations, because I feel that English language learners are one of the most, I just don't even have the words. They have so much potential. There's so much possibility if a teacher just takes the time to believe in a child and just show them that they have so much to offer, and that being an English language learner is not special education. If you are an English language learner, that means you probably know more than one language, and that means you are smarter than the rest of the kids. And so I will include a pep talk just for kids at the end of this, because some of the best work I did in the classroom was building up my kiddos who were not the typical norm, like my gifted learners, my English language learners, and my kids with ADHD. The whole entire reason why I took the gifted endorsement was to better meet the needs of my kids who were English language learners, because I felt that they were not being identified the way that they should. And so this course is going to give you the opportunity to modify your curriculum in a way that is easy and that will be best practices for all kids. And so I'm using the lens of social studies to help you, because what it is like a scrapbook of sorts, in like a digital guide to setting up your English language learners for success the way that I did in the classroom my last year. And so included are a lot of social studies ideas, because I was departmentalized and taught science and social studies. And as a social studies whisperer, super passionate about social studies. Okay, I believe in connecting the past to the present, and I believe in making content relevant. And to do that, you also need to include people of diversity. And so that's super, super, super important. Okay, so I hope that this gives you a lot of practical tips and a lot of inspiration so that you can set yourself up for success, for modifying your content for English language learners, and then therefore the kiddos are set up for success. Because if you take that time to build that relationship with those kiddos, then you will be amazed at the progress they will make. I had kids coming in not speaking English, and at the end of the year, I was mind blown. They were reading on like second or third grade reading level. I mean, mind blowing. It just takes one teacher to make a difference. And the fact that you're watching this right now means that you care. Okay? Thank you so much. A little background first. I want you to think about your comfort level with where you are with modifying curriculum. Maybe you have no experience at all, and that's okay. Maybe you do have some training, but you've just been too busy. That's probably more likely the case. So what this is going to do, like I said, there's a reason it's called a quick start guide, because it's going to help you with some easy strategies. I'm not asking you to fill out paperwork upon paperwork upon paperwork and do these really complicated things. Okay, first of all, I will be using the words English language learners and E.S.O.L interchangeably, or ELLs, because those are the terms that are familiar to me. I realize in other states, your students who are English language learners are referred to by other program types. But I'm from Georgia, and those are the terms that I'm familiar with. Also, I will say newcomers, and by newcomers, I mean students who might be a level 1. Okay, let's think about levels first of all. In the book, I refer to WIDA levels, WIDA. And I have a link to WIDA.us to help you get a little background upon the different WIDA levels, because the way the levels go from like beginning student to like exiting the E.S.O.L program. And so it's kind of important to be familiar with that before you get further upon your study. And it's in each subject level varies as well. So that website has a tremendous blog, and so that's a great place to start. And I've also included tons of helpful links at the end of this, okay? And so thank you so much for watching, and think about where you are now, what level you're at, and then hopefully by the end you'll be ready to level up. Okay, let's get started. Action on your walls and in your classroom and in your classroom library. Ready? So, your classroom should probably not look like a school supply store threw up in it, because nobody reads those signs that are plastered all over the wall. Nobody wants a circus. Nobody wants neon 80s explosion, okay? All that stuff you see on Pinterest, dial it down, okay? What I did in my classroom when I taught social studies is I had a timeline on the wall, and that is going to be very helpful for any teacher to have, because you can tie in language arts to social studies, and you can tie in even science to social studies and math. And so it's important to have that as a baseline for your students, because it's going to be very abstract for them, especially like for me, my curriculum was Civil War, started with Civil War. And the most confusing thing for English language learners, besides grammar, is going to be American history, because they're not familiar with those iconic American landmarks, and like they don't know what the 4th of July is for. They don't even know what like Groundhog's Day is for. So I had a timeline that I put up at the beginning of the year, and I've done timelines different ways. Okay, the one way that I did not repeat again was when I went unit by unit. Can you guess what happened? I started with Civil War, and then I had Reconstruction, and then, well, at the end of the school year, I had Civil War and Reconstruction, because I told myself, I was like, I'm gonna just add it unit by unit with important dates and events, and that plan did not work out. It was great for Civil War, and guess what? The next year, those timeline cards made for amazing station ideas, because the kids would match the event to the year. But I don't recommend doing that unless you... Okay, come on. Most teachers do not have time to sit there and like create these unit timeline cards during the school year. And now if you want to make them ahead of time during the summer, that's awesome. But I don't advise doing that unit by unit, and especially for English language learners. So what I did my last year in the classroom was I had some word wall kind of picture cards on the wall. I bought some on Teachers Pay Teachers, and some I bought from like school supply stores or whatever, or postcards I had from different historical places I'd been to. I did have some posters on the wall, but what I did is I made my whole classroom a huge timeline. And I started with Civil War, and then I went around the room, and I didn't even have years for things. I just kind of had images with words. I had like Civil War, and then I went around the corner, I had like westward expansion, and I had like Industrial Revolution, and then it went all the way around, and by the sink I had the Cold War, and that was kind of almost the last thing we finished with. We did have War on Terrorism, but I didn't have any kind of picture cards for that. And so by the time that we got to the Cold War, my students recognized the images, and they did look at those because they were just images. They're not going to read stuff if you have like this poster with like all this information on it. They're not going to pay attention to that. But if they're images, they are going to pay attention to that. So that would be my suggestion. Make your whole classroom a timeline. And another thing you can do, out in the hall, my whole grade level and I put together this like road tripping through the USA timeline thing. And it was awesome because the 4th graders were near there too. And so they could look at the events as well. I had each individual class responsible for creating events, and what they had to do, I just gave them like decades. It's like, okay, your class is responsible for 1860 to 1870, and the kids would just like draw, and you can do this in your classroom as well. They just would draw a picture on an index card and then write a name for the event and the date. And then I had them hang it, and if they did the wrong time, I put it up there. So that is something you could debate, but that was really cool because it was a huge thing. It was a huge collaborative thing the whole grade level did together. Okay, so there are some ideas. I would definitely look on Teachers Pay Teachers for things that are already created, because sometimes money is better to spend than time, right? Because teachers have a lot going on. So that is how I set up my classroom walls, my classroom space to be engaging for English language learners. I did have a few science things on the wall too, but if I were just setting up a general classroom, I might have a few things like parts of speech or something. I had the writing process. I had that on there too. And I would have some things for reading, but I would not have it plastered wall to wall, because that left me room to have kids, like when they did create timelines and stuff like that. I have a whole blog post about Civil War timelines we made. Like, I hung those up because that's what the kids wanted to see, more than like this money I had wasted like on all these like things from the local school supply store. Nobody wanted to see those. Okay, so let's move on to classroom library suggestions, especially for social studies with English language learners in mind. Okay, here's a topic that's a little bit controversial. Labeling books. I don't believe in labeling books by levels, because I don't want any kids to be embarrassed by picking books that are, not age appropriate, but maybe appropriate for their reading level, and especially English language learners. Of course, if a student is just learning English and they're in 5th grade, they're not going to be reading Harry Potter, right? They're going to be reading things that look more like a 1st grader might read at first. And so I would I would label books by their genre and maybe label them by what their topic was, but I would never ever label books, because I didn't want kids to be embarrassed. And so I think if you are giving kids specific books, like for guided reading, if you are teaching language arts, then you need to have those separately somewhere else and not have them in your general classic library. Okay, so the way that I have my books organized, you can see in the pictures, I had them in milk crates, and that's like the cheapest storage system ever. You might be able to get them from your school. That's where I got them, for free. So what I did is just zip tie them together, and then I created just labels. And I started with, I had books for like antebellum, like before the Civil War, and then I had books going all the way through our time period, and then I had some for like government and some for like maybe like geography and stuff like that. And I also had I used like those tubs that you buy like at Walmart for like less than $5, and then I also use milk crates. And I believe in having a wide variety of types of books. With social studies, you should have historical fiction just as much as you should have nonfiction and biographies and poetry. I was a firm believer in integrating literacy, because the more they see it, the more they it sinks in with them, right? So when kids would finish my activities, the ones that did finish, I would tell them go get a book, and there was no like reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid in social studies. So that's just something to think about. There are tons of great graphic novels for social studies, especially the You Wouldn't Want to Be series and the March series from John Lewis. So those are just some things to think about with organizing your classroom library. And if I was teaching everything, I had a separate, and I still did have a separate bookshelf for like realistic fiction books or for mystery books or something like that. So I lean more towards organizing your classroom library by genre versus labeling it. Okay, so of course you have to go with what your school says, but think about it. If your students who are brand new to America, they're already uncomfortable as it is in a new place, then they're not going to want to, what's going to happen is if you have the books labeled and it's like level A to level Z or something, then they're not going to read. They're not going to read, or they're going to grab books that are not just right books for them because they want to fit in. And when you have a variety of books, including picture books too, then all of the kids are picking the picture books sometimes, because it's just fine to read a picture book sometimes, especially like Patricia Polacco. She writes the most amazing books for social studies, especially. A lot of them are biographical, or they have like a social studies theme, so highly recommend those. And then when kids are picking, all the kids are picking those, then if you need to hand a student who's an English language learner a book that's on their level discreetly, then it's not going to be a big deal because everyone's reading picture books. So that's just something to think about. Okay, and something I don't address with reading in the book is, and in the pages of the, well, what I did with for the course is I'm breaking down the book chunk at a time. And so this is a chunk of a big ebook and a big print, and also going to be a print book, but I don't talk about close reading. And so just a bonus tip about close reading, what I did for English language learners is I would give them the same exact reading passage. I would give everybody the same activity, and then I would go back later after, and then I would give them something else, like discreetly. I would never be like, snatch it back, oh wait, you can't do this. Because that's embarrassing for that child. You don't ever want to shame them or make them feel embarrassed because they're just learning English. And so for close reading, what I would have kids do is I taught them annotations. And at first, my English language learners, I would just have them circle words they knew. So that's a strategy you can do. Just have them circle words they know. And it might just be like numbers, starting with colors, starting with those basics. So while the rest of your kids are reading a passage and annotating it, and hopefully they're doing that in social studies, my kids were, then your student, and you can do this with any worksheet, any assignment, your kids can just circle the words that they know. So that's just a tip. And it can just be like, you could also just have them circle I, the letter I, when that appears, or the letter A, or circle names or circle places, and just make it basic because that gives them something to do. And then eventually you scaffold that and build them up, and then you just have them like write one sentence about what they read. So that's just a bonus tip about close reading. I talk about that in, I had them glue their close reading passages in their interactive notebooks, and I have a whole blog post about that. Okay, moving on.
Wow, I did it. I'm live. Wow. Not sure if anybody will be able to catch this live. I'm Andrea Reynolds. I'm the creator of this group, and I want to come on here and do a video about my mission with the group sometime and like where I hope to take this. But I wanted to go ahead and do a quick tutorial about, not really a tutorial, give you a quick tip about how you can organize your classroom with social studies in mind. Hello to everyone who's not watching. This is my first time doing a Facebook Live video, and I thought I would jump on here before I have to take everything down for testing, because we start testing Monday, so I'm going to be ripping stuff down soon. I also have my dashing library organized by different topics for social studies, so I just wanted to show that real quick. I teach 5th grade in Metro Atlanta, Georgia, and like I said, I want to come on and do another like welcome video and more about me sometime, but I thought while I'm here and while I still have the guts to do the Facebook Live, I thought I'd come on here. Alrighty, so let me show you how I have my library. This is what I did at the beginning of the school year, and I don't have the different categories, like the books themselves labeled, but what I did is I took it, and now I do teach science too, so I just took a couple of random books, and I got these at Walmart for just a few dollars, and I don't have the books leveled because that, I just feel like that I have a wide range of learners. I feel like that discourages them. So I just put like American government and like culture and geography in a container. And then these are really overflow books, but the kinds of things that don't fit like into a real category, like this one, I just have in this Miss Reynolds recommends. So what I did is our curriculum starts with Civil War, but I did have a lot of books about colonial America. So I started there, and then I kind of made my bookshelf out of crates, and so I tied them all together, and with zip ties. That's a real cheap way to make a bookshelf. I have that a lot in my room, but I just kind of organized it by category, and I had a lot for Civil War, so I have a whole bunch of crates for Civil War. And if anybody watching is interested in these labels that I made, I will be happy. Now, of course, I printed them on purple paper. I'd be happy to email them to you or post them or something. Just let me know. You could just comment here, just comment in the group. So then I did westward expansion. I have a ton for westward expansion, and that covers industrial revolution and like turn of the century, like inventors too. So I made another category for that. And then the rest, we go through like globalization. So I didn't have very much for World War I, of course. And then World War II, I got a ton. That's my favorite topic. And then it goes Cold War at the bottom through civil rights. And I should have made one more civil rights. And then like after Cold War and globalization, like September 11th, we cover that through the war on terrorism. So that's just something to think about, because I know if you just organize your turn around, if you just organize your social studies books by like saying nonfiction, or of course you could do them by genre, like historical fiction. I have the historical fiction mixed in with the biographies and the nonfiction, and the kids really like that. And if I had it to do here, I would label each basket or section create like a specific sticker or something, so that things would go in the right place, because I'm sure if we dove through this all right now, they're not organized the right way. But I also wanted to show you quickly how I did my walls at the beginning of the year, because they make a giant timeline. And once I take stuff down for testing, it's not going to come back up. So I'm just going to be taking it down probably tomorrow. I wanted to go ahead and show you now. I kind of started, and some of it's already been taken down just through the year. I'll rip it off when I use it. I started with Civil War on the bottom down here. And the room makes like a giant circle. So I did Civil War, and we just did civil rights. So I kind of pulled that stuff off. And pardon the random science stuff. And then I had some of the Civil War stuff down here. So it goes Civil War, and then I just have like, I got those at the National Archives a long time ago. And then over here, I didn't have very much on like Reconstruction, turn of the century. And the kids actually look at these pictures. I'm really surprised. And then when you go over here, that's my Monopoly game that I'm going to open one day. Over here, it goes through, I don't have either. I don't have every era. So I've got Roaring Twenties, and I bought these on Teachers Day. It's like word wall cards. And then we go over here to, of course, Great Depression. You can tell the time periods that are my favorite. As you see, I got a ton for World War II. And I've just got general government stuff right there, and I have lots of quotes too. Because I love Teddy Roosevelt. I just have his quotes, Eleanor Roosevelt. So World War II, and then Cold War, and then Vietnam War, and then Indians. I don't have any more Indians. So that's just something to think about. I've also done a giant timeline, like for years, and that's really fun. But that takes a lot of follow through, and this has been on the wall all year. And that's kind of like we talked about the Cold War, so they saw entertainment, and they were like, "Ooh, that's exciting." So, turn around. Thank you for watching. And if you're watching this on the replay, thank you. I know that there's some, I'm not quite sure how to use this. This is my first time. I know you can swipe up to share, but I don't know if you can share in a group. I will be doing more tips, and I think that members of the group can do their own videos. And you are welcome, if you're doing something awesome in social studies, or if you have like a test prep strategy or something to share, or something that would benefit everyone, feel free to jump on and do a video. I might be trying some on my business page, running things with Reynolds too, more stuff for like instruction for English language learners and gifted learners, because that's another passion of mine. But I plan to come on here and do weekly tips, something for social studies. But like I said, you're welcome to try it out too if you have an idea. So thank you for watching, and I will do this right now, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.
Okay, this is broken down into different sections based on like my top 10 hacks. Teacher hacks are a great thing, like my little tips and tricks that I use to modify curriculum that the kids didn't even know. And I share some that relate to social studies as well. So you might accidentally end up liking social studies when this is over. So some of the topics I'm going to cover are setting up your classroom space and organize your classroom library, primarily like for social studies or just to have more engagement from your English language learners. Also, I'm going to cover with setting up your classroom, more like how I use a timeline on the wall as a preview, because it's important to preview things. I'm also going to cover posting language objectives in addition to whatever required curriculum standards that you are supposed to have. I'm also going to cover like some ways that I used whole brain teaching and did like hands-on vocabulary, and ways that I did used teach and had the kids had student directed learning, and also gave the students opportunities to build speaking and listening skills, because all teachers are E.S.O.L teachers. If your students are pulled out for services, then that's generally not too much of the day. And so it's very important to include those kids all through the day. That way you can increase their language acquisition even more, okay? Some other things that are going to be covered are going to be like anytime activities that English language learners can do, and like how to make a newcomer kit. Because I don't know how many times I was sitting there, like maybe it was during my planning time, or walking out the door, or in the middle of a reader's theater presentation. Yes. Or right before standardized testing. True story, it happened. And I got, Mrs. Reynolds, please send someone to get your new student. Like out of nowhere. That's how it was done at my school. Like you didn't know. You didn't get a heads up you were getting a new student. You were very lucky if you found out the day before. And so it's a good idea to have some stuff on hand in case you get a new student who does not speak English, because chances are the child might not even speak a language that you speak. I was lucky to know Spanish, but there were times when I got some students that spoke languages that I don't know. And so it's important to have a way to communicate, and some ways to have the basic needs met, and kids to ask for help if they need it from a newcomer kit. Okay. I'm also going to cover integrating the arts, because I think that's really, really important. And I'm also going to cover my picture dictionaries that I created to be a more supportive type of study guide for English language learners. Okay. So I hope that this is helpful, and I hope that you learn a lot. And let's get started with setting up our classroom space with English language learners in mind.